The Knicks are alive. The Pirates are dead set against being good, and we talk NFL draft with NBC Sports' Connor Rogers on this edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Welcome in. It is episode 10. I feel like Cal Ripken Jr. at this point. What an accomplishment on my part. Welcome into a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Before we get too deep into it, please hit that subscribe button, like the episode, just hit a few buttons. It could be absolute gibberish. I don't care. It's like doing a little tiny favor for me. All right, on this episode, we will get into the Knicks Game 3 win against the Pacers, and I will predict the future when it comes to the Knicks with 100% accuracy. I have seen the future, and I'll tell you that coming up. Also, now that the NFL draft is in the rear view, we're going to talk it over with NBC Sports' Connor Rogers about the winners, the losers. Also look a little ahead to fantasy football. Those drafts are right around the corner. But I want to begin with some baseball because Memorial Day weekend is traditionally the time where you can no longer say it's early in the baseball season. It's still early. Generally, you're about 50 games in. You're closing in about 1/3 of the season. It's a good first barometer of where teams are at or players are at. And there have been some fascinating storylines so far between what Aaron Judge is doing or Shohei Ohtani or the Tigers' fast start, the Orioles' disastrous beginning, the Soto situation with the Mets, Ronald Acuna's return, and of course the Dodgers versus everybody else in baseball. But I don't want to talk about any of those. I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates. Yes, that'll get those podcast numbers booming. Nothing like Pirates talk to get those numbers rolling in. Why in the name of God would you want to talk about the Pirates? Well, because they actually have a fascinating situation brewing. One that has been officially brought up now, and one that will be a running theme for probably all of this season, probably for the next few baseball seasons, the off seasons, the trade deadlines, you name it. And it's because of their ace pitcher, Paul Skenes. So yes, the Pirates find themselves in the headlines. And of course, it's not because they're good, because they're never good. But there's been a tiny little smoke, a tiny little whisper around baseball asking the question of whether or not the Pirates would ever consider trading Paul Skenes. Now, at first glance, that sounds insane. Paul Skenes is already a stud. He's about to turn 23. He won the Rookie of the Year last year. He finished third in the Cy Young voting. And this year, he's picked up right where he left off. Electric stuff, a big game demeanor. He is an absolute ace already. Why would anyone ever trade someone like that? Well, almost any team in baseball wouldn't. But we're not talking about just any team in baseball. We're talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates. So some background. Let's say you're a 40-year-old Pirates fan. You're not old enough really to remember the Barry Bonds years. Your glory days are a time period of 2013 to 2015. 3 wild card berths, 1 wild card game win, and not a single playoff series victory. That's it. That's the peak. The last time the Pirates won the World Series was 1979. Since then, they've made the playoffs 6 times. Since Barry Bonds left in 92, 4 winning seasons. Over 3 decades. They've not won a division title in 33 years and counting. If you were playing the Family Feud and top 5 answers are on the board, worst run baseball franchises, worst run sports franchises, the Pittsburgh Pirates would be on the board. So while the question of trading Paul Skenes might at first blush seem ridiculous, you have to consider who you're talking about when you're talking about the franchise involved. And here's the thing. Does Pittsburgh actually have a plan? The Pirates have been bad for a while now. If they were truly rebuilding, you'd like to see some signs of that in the wins and the losses. But what is the Pirates' long-term vision? Because most franchises, even bad ones, they have a plan. They rebuild, they spend, they try. So I don't know if the Pirates have a plan. I don't know if the Pirates actually want to ever kind of turn things around. But in terms of this story about the Pirates trading Paul Skenes, it exists because we've seen this movie before, many times before with the Pirates. Maybe the best example of it most recently was when they had Gerrit Cole. Gerrit Cole was the number 1 overall pick in 2011. He made his debut in 2013. Pirates immediately turned it around. They ended a 20-year playoff drought and they made 3 straight postseason trips. In 2015, Cole goes 19-8, ERA of 2.60. He finished 3rd or 4th in the Cy Young voting. They won 98 games that year. And then you know what happened next? Nothing. That was the end of the run. By 2018, Cole's 2 years from free agency. So what did the Pirates do? They trade him to the Astros. And the return was basically, they got Joe Musgrove, Jason Martin, Colin Moran, and Michael Feliz. That's the big package of prospects. They got fleeced. Now, if they had moved him in 2015, the return would have been massive, but they waited. They misread the situation like they do often. They lost value like they always do, and they missed an opportunity to actually build something. So flash forward to 2025, and here comes Skenes, who might be a better prospect, certainly has had a better start to his career than Gerrit Cole did back then. And the question is, will the Pirates waste this window as well? Because this season's already down the tubes. Yes, it's only Memorial Day, but you can already see the Pirates are going absolutely nowhere. They've fired their manager, Derek Shelton. The GM, Ben Cherington's on the hot seat. They're in last place again. And sometimes it's darkest before the dawn, but the Pirates' problem is they have really no offense. And even after being bad year after year after year, it doesn't seem like there's any big bats coming up. The farm system is pretty barren. And all the picks that they've made, none have made an impact. And Cherington's draft record is shaky at best. So the one big flaw in this whole plan is, why would ownership ever trust Cherington to make a move like this? And that is a fair point. I will grant you that. But let's play the game for a second. What would it even take to trade Paul Skenes? What would a team have to give up to be able to get someone like him? Well, the best example most recently we've had would, I guess, be Juan Soto. 2022, Soto's 23 years old, an MVP candidate, gets dealt with 3 years of club control left, and the return was massive for the Nationals. C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, James Wood, got 3 other players. 6 players, including multiple MLB-ready players. Now think about Skenes. He's under team control for 5 pennant races. He's making under $1 million. Even in arbitration, he's not going to break the bank. His value is enormous. You could make the argument his value will never be higher, and it would take a massive offer to be even in the conversation. And I think multiple teams would be willing to be in that conversation. And maybe his value is just so great that no team can put together a representative offer. But the problem is, this is the Pirates. We know how this story ends. They don't pay stars. They don't build contenders, they don't get the timing right, and they don't win. So, of course, Skenes should stay in Pittsburgh. He should be the centerpiece that you build around. He should be that guy. But that would require the Pirates to stop being the Pirates. That would mean they would have to stop being who they've been for basically 40 years and who they've been under their current ownership. So we know how this ends, with him getting traded, which fans might think is the worst case scenario. That's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is him getting hurt at some point while he's still on the Pirates. And here's the thing, it will happen. He will get hurt at some point. Almost assuredly, him not getting hurt as a pitcher, that would be a bigger upset than the Pirates signing him to a long-term contract for what he's worth. So again, the one flaw in this entire plan is you can't trust the current GM, Ben Cherington, to trade him when he's not been able to build anything close to a team around Skenes. But we know that the Pirates will trade him at some point. The only way they could afford to keep him is if he gets hurt, which would mean another missed opportunity. So let's bottom line it. We know how this story ends. The Pirates are going to trade Paul Skenes. Not today, probably not tomorrow, maybe not even this year, but it's coming because that's what they do and that's who they are. And if that's the case, if that's the path they're going to take, which almost assuredly they're going to, then stop pretending otherwise. Be honest, be aggressive, be bold. Because wasting Skenes' prime like they did with Cole, like they did with Andrew McCutchen, like they've done for years now, would be malpractice. Maximize the return, set the price high, and deal him when his value is at its greatest. And that's not going to be in a couple of years. What's popular is not always right, and what's right is not always popular. So they can hold on to him for a year or two because they don't want to tick off the fan base, as if finishing in last place is not ticking off the fan base. Just keep doing what you've been doing for the last 30 years, and you'll always end up where you've been for the last 30 years, which is not just last place, it's irrelevancy. So yeah, they're going to trade Skenes. We all know that. I would just say, don't screw it up, because this might be the last chance this franchise has to matter for the next 10 years. All right, we're now joined by Connor Rogers. You see him everywhere. NBC Sports. He does, of course, everything with the NFL draft. He's got the fantasy football happy hour, the Jets pre and post game on SNY, the Mets pod. Very busy guy, but he's nice enough to give us a couple of minutes today. Connor, what's going on, my man? Thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me, Gordon. Always good to catch up with you, man. I appreciate it. What's going on?
Well, look, a lot of stuff's going on. We'll get into maybe some Mets stuff before this is all said and done, but we've had a couple of weeks now to kind of digest the NFL draft. Do you ever go back after a draft is over a couple of weeks later and look things back over? And how hard is it to evaluate things in real time as the draft is taking place? Because those draft grades come out, the day after the draft. How hard is that to evaluate?
It's fast, right? Especially when you're doing it in the moment. I think for me, I really look at it surprisingly 2 days after, because I'm responsible for grades. And the way I do grades is like I stack up write down every player from the class, look at pick value first, my rankings, and think about scheme fits. And then you kind of have these reflection moments like, wow, this guy went here like 3 rounds later than I thought, or it could be earlier, it could be later. This guy went undrafted. And so you look at it in that it's kind of this whirlwind, and then you don't think about it for a little while because you kind of move on to watching the next class and getting that groundwork for summer, which sounds crazy, but that's just how fast the cycles move. But in real time, I think the shock factor is something I've gotten better with. I think the hard part is you might have a player go like Maxwell Harrison, maybe isn't the greatest example because I thought he would go in the first round, but he went to the Bills at 30, and he's somebody that I looked at more as a third round player. And in the moment you're trying to think, okay, well, here's the things of why they really liked him. Here's the upside they see and they're betting on versus here's my concerns, rather than just going, I had this guy at 89th. He went 30th. This is an F. I can't believe they did this. It's a weird being in the draft industry. I find it now in terms of how you almost want a big board for every team, but you just don't have the time as a one-man scout, because there could be a player that I think would be more of a back end of round 1 fit for a certain team that might be kind of a back end of round 2 fit for another team. And I mean, we've seen this over the years. You look at Xavier Worthy going to the Chiefs. Here's one that people don't talk about a lot. Will McDonald going to the Jets. Like Will McDonald in that Saleh scheme really got his confidence up, and he turned into a double-digit sack player where when the Jets took him in the top 20, everyone was like, wow, really? Where some other places he might have really struggled to get on the field. So there's examples like that, countless examples. And you got to remind yourself, instead of giving this kind of shock value take in real time, you want to kind of save those bullets, I would say.
How much does fit matter? And the way I mean it is that I look at teams sometimes, they can't get anything right. Like my Dolphins can't get anything right. So it could be a player that if the Bills took him or the Chiefs took him or, the Eagles, you would say, hey, they'll figure it out somehow, even if it doesn't seem like a perfect fit right away. Especially dysfunctional organizations. How hard is it not to just automatically say that that's a bad pick?
It is. It's a weird balance, right? Because there are times where you look at it and you go, man, like I wouldn't want to bet against what Andy Reid thinks of a wide receiver or what so-and-so thinks of. I mean, an interesting one is I think when you just talk about scheme is you look at a lot what Baltimore or even what the Rams will do sometimes. Now the Rams are a more man run scheme versus a zone run scheme where they'll take these heavier kind of mauling type of guys. And those guys might have more success under Sean McVay than where they would anywhere else. And so it's weird when you're betting against guys that have such a track record and thinking, like, man, the chances of me being right over this legendary guy. And where it got really interesting, like here's an example where it went the other way, because there's plenty of times where I'm wrong and obviously an NFL legend is right. Bill Belichick was a terrible drafter at the end. And a lot of us were sitting around. I remember when they took Tyquan Thornton, the speedy wide receiver in the second round a couple of years ago, who couldn't catch, couldn't run routes, wasn't physical. And they took him over a handful. I think he even went over George Pickens that year. And you kind of looked through, and Bill had enough bad picks at that point where you're like, here's another one. But there was a lot of times with Bill where you were like, God, this is Bill Belichick. And it just feels so weird that this guy who has forgotten more about football than the rest of us will ever know. But there are times where it goes the other way. And it's not that the game passes these guys by, but it's just the scouting trends, or they're so tied up in coaching and then they don't have the trust in their scouting department and things like that, which is really what kind of ended Bill's tenure with the Patriots, was that he just couldn't wear both hats. Where you look at Pete Carroll's a guy that while he's not with Seattle anymore, he had John Schneider there and he trusted John Schneider there to handle their drafts. And I think Pete was a little better at balancing, like, I'm the coach and I'm the CEO of the organization, but I also need somebody to do the scouting while I'm coaching. So that's the weird lines you find yourself dealing with of, oh man, like when Kyle Shanahan takes a running back, you're like, there's a good chance Kyle knows a thing or two
good
about
pick.
Running back. Right. Yeah. It does change your mindset and you try to see what they see in it.
Let's start with some specific picks. The Titans at 1, they go with Cam Ward. How quickly do you think he will be the guy there? Do you think week 1 he's the starter? And how long do you think that acclimation process will take for him as the number 1 pick?
He'll start, and I think with Cam, you'll see enough promising flashes this year that you feel good about building around him in the offseason. I just don't think they have enough that we're going to get a Jaden Daniels kind of season out of Cam Ward. And I think Cam Ward is really good. I know it's weird for me to sit here on a show and say, like, number 1 pick's really good. Like, yeah, great take. But how often do you hear people hype up Cam Ward? You just don't hear it a lot. And the perspective is, I liked him better than I liked JJ McCarthy. I liked him better than I liked Bo Nix. So in that class, I thought he would have been a top 12 pick where everybody was like, this class stinks. He's just the number 1 pick because he's in this class. That's not the case. I just think they're going to be a little careful. It's the Callahan family. They care about running the football, and they've spent a lot on their offensive line, resources and money. They don't want to have Cam playing backyard ball all the time like he did at Washington State and Miami. And I think they want to kind of have him bring a little bit more of a calming presence to the offense that it's lacked with Will Levis. And Cam will make mistakes, but there'll be enough wow moments that he'll start out of the gate and get those moments out of him now, because Tennessee doesn't need to win this year. They just need to have competency under center that it's like, okay, now guys want to play here and we can start building around Cam at the skill positions, which they took a lot of depth skill guys in this draft. I think they'll actually go get a real alpha number 1 target next offseason for him, but I'm really excited about him. And it's kind of bizarre how underrated he's become in this entire thing.
The first real shocker was at 2 and Jacksonville moving up, paying a very heavy price to get Travis Hunter, a fascinating player. How do you see him transitioning to the NFL, and how much of an impact can he really have both ways?
It's going to be a pretty big deal out of the gate because of the resources they sent to get him. The math and any analytics you want to break it down will always tell you that it's never worth it to give that much capital for one player. I try to balance just a real life feel with that. I don't think this was some insane overpay because I think he's a special player. I thought he was the best player in the draft over Abdul Carter. I think that Jacksonville really values his wide receiver ability. I think Liam Cohen comes from the Bucs and now looks at his offense and goes, okay, I have a big wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. that can stretch the field and get manufactured targets. Now I look at Travis Hunter. Can he be my Chris Godwin, where he could do everything underneath? He's dangerous with the ball in his hands. He's going to catch everything thrown his way. He's going to be an elite separator. I mean, Liam Cohen was hired there, and same with Gladstone, the GM. They need to make Trevor Lawrence look as good as he could possibly be. That's what this trade was about. The defensive stuff to me will come secondarily, I think. I don't think they're looking at him and going, go be a corner, go be a hero. I'm honestly fascinated because they had a lot of problems on the back end last year. I mean, a lot of problems. You give him looks at free safety and say, you're going to play 90% of our offensive snaps. We want you on the field impacting the offense as a wide receiver. And then we're going to be a little bit more careful on defense with you. Can you go get us a takeaway or two at certain times? Can you just take away the football? We don't need you burning out, running around against Jamar Chase for, 50 snaps a game or anything like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but my read on the situation is that's not the plan for him. And I think at the end of the day, if you think he could be a special wide receiver in this league, which I believe that, I compared him to Ocho Cinco. I thought he was a very similar player to him as a wide receiver. Then I think the trade will be worth it for them.
All right, they would go to the Giants at 3 with Abdul Carter. I think you said he had him as the second best player in this draft. So any issues there with the Giants adding more to the defense?
No, because they were in a hard spot, right? It's that Carter's so good you had to take him. And there's no sin in having 3 capable edge rushers. That is going to help the Giants a lot. Carter's going to be a phenomenal player. I just think with the Giants, it's either you believed in Jackson Dart or you don't. And I'm just not very confident in him. I like Brian Dable a lot. I think if anybody can bring out the best in Dart, it'll be Dable. I didn't think they even overpaid to go back and get him. It's 2 third-round picks. So it's not like the cost was that drastic. But you just wonder if Dart's not good, is that kind of end this tenure for the Giants? What I feel really good about is Abdul Carter is going to be a hell of a player. And the Giants defense has an identity up front. The Giants defense actually could be very, very good. They've added at corner now. They obviously have 2 safeties they feel really good about. their front is going to get after quarterbacks. Hopefully they could stop the run at a high level this year. And Malik Neighbors can be a superstar. So they got one of the best players at the draft. You just kind of wonder if the wheels are going to spin on the never-ending Giants conversation now of who's the savior under center for the future. And they, not oddly enough, but no surprisingly enough, are a fan base that's always going to have one eye towards Arch Manning, no matter whatever he does. And I just don't know if Dart will do enough to sway that conversation. But the best part is we get to find out.
What do you think he'll struggle with most at the next level?
Play speed. That was the number one thing. I just saw a lot of balls that were thrown late. And you look at Trey Harris, his number one wide receiver that went to the Chargers in the second round. Trey would bail him out on some throws that he's not going to get away with at the next level. Now, Dart's a good athlete. He's got enough arm talent. I like him as a touch thrower better than a tight window thrower. But there's just times where, hey, that ball was a second or two late, and a second or two late in college might be an incompletion or a tip pass. A second or two late in the NFL is an interception. So I think the Giants did the right thing and got two veterans that they'll know when Dart is ready. The Giants just have such a brutal schedule. Like, are people going to be clamoring for him to start, the fifth game against the Saints or whatever it is? There's not a soft landing for Dart outside of that game. Giants have a late bye week as well, where you don't know if you're going to see him till then. So I just think the processing is going to take a little bit, going from Lane Kiffin's offense to playing in one of the most brutal divisions in all of the sport in the NFC East.
Yeah, and it just really feels like a weird spot as well, because Brian Daboll has pressure to win, right? Like, it's all well and good to say we got to be patient, but if the Giants are sitting at 1-4 to start the season and they're going with Russell Wilson, okay, we got to get the rookie in there, but we still have to win games, as you mentioned, in a very difficult division with a very difficult schedule. It just seems like, from the things outside that they can't control, it seems like a really tough thing to navigate, bringing him along while also trying to win games.
That's the weird balance with them, right? Do we know behind the scenes, are they just committed to Daboll for at least 2 years to give Dart a chance? I've never gotten that feel. It felt like this year was like, oh, they're keeping them. Okay, here we go.
Right.
And now you look at the schedule, and not to play Mike and the Mad Dog, but I mean, look at the first four games. It's you get to go to the Commanders, you get to go to the Cowboys. Obviously, then you get your
first home game is against the Chiefs.
Against the Chiefs. And then the Chargers, week 4. The Chargers are going to be better than people realize, unless people are onto that by now. Like, they're not the 50-50 Chargers in my mind anymore. The Chargers are going to go out and take care of the games they have to take care of, because that's what Harbaugh does. If the Giants are 0-4 or 1-3 to start the season before they get the soft landing against the Saints, and then you get the Eagles the next 2 out of 3. It's just, you're right, Gordon. Like, it's a weird balance of, okay, the schedule gods were brutal to us, which they were. So now we need to show that the young quarterback is promising, because we're just not going to win games. Is that a good scenario for Jackson Dart? I don't know about that.
Yeah. And it feels like this year, it's all well and good to say you have trust, but I think at some point you need hard numbers. And the only hard number you can really look at is wins and losses. I get it. If you can devise a thing where the Giants are within a field goal and they're just losing some heartbreakers, okay, fine. Maybe we can have some confidence in Daboll for another year. But there have been far worse situations that have not gotten patience. And at some point, you would think the Giants' patience is going to wear thin with the coach.
I did that exact thing with Joe Douglas for 6 years, where it was, oh, they've done this. Oh, they're done that. They're building it the right way. He hit on this first round pick. Then you look at the record, which nobody wants to ever just talk about. The Jets never win. They never win. And no GM in football gets 6 years to lose all the time. And I think what people got really misconstrued is, number one, like, Joe Douglas at the end of that tenure should have sent Mike McCagnon the biggest fruit basket ever, because the Jet fan developed this idea of, like, okay, we have no idea how to draft. We can't hit on any pick. And that really defeated the fan base. And then Joe Douglas would hit on draft picks, but he didn't build a team. There's a difference. Like, you can hit on a ton of picks, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, that's all great. But the Jets did not build a team. And they didn't build around Darnold, and then they missed on Zach Wilson, and then they threw a lifeline hoping Aaron Rodgers would save him, and he didn't. And they didn't win games, and they didn't build a team to win games. So, and Joe got as fair a shot as I've ever seen a GM get in this situation. But it was tough, where you tell fans, like, listen, don't you want your team to win? That's what this is all about at the end of the day.
All right, let's move to the Jets. You liked some of their picks early. How would you judge their draft?
Well, speaking of Joe Douglas, they managed to, I think, avoid his early mistake, where he kind of had his, eye on the prize in his first draft of what Mekhi Becton could be, rather than what Tristan Wirfs was. the Jets sat there and they had an adult draft with the first 3 picks. They said, okay, we're going to get Armand Membu because I thought he was the best tackle in the draft, and we have a hole at right tackle, and he plays right tackle. We're not going to shuffle these guys around. Now we feel good about those 5. Okay, Mason Taylor in the second round. We have nothing at tight end. Tanner Engstrom coming from Detroit with all the 12 personnel they run. They need a capable tight end. And he's 20 years old, turning 21, where these guys are really young prospects growing into their bodies with upside. And then in round 3, instead of panicking, they just took a really good player. They took a second-round player in the 3rd round in Azareye'h Thomas. I didn't love the Brandon Stevens signing for them, which now it looks even more odd after you got Azareye'h Thomas, because I think he's just going to be a better player at corner. And then on day 3, I don't know if they fell into the trap of like, okay, the area scouts that were already here are making the picks because we don't get to this point of the draft, or we fell in love with certain guys, but I didn't think they did a good job of combining value with needs. So the Jets had an adult draft where it was very meat and potatoes in the first 3 rounds, which is what this organization has been missing for a very, very long time. You just wish that they had a little bit more upside or promise at needs on day 3, because if the Jets get a 3-player draft, that's a really, really good draft. But now you need those 3 guys to hit.
Any surprise that the Jets didn't take a shot with Shedeur?
It's interesting. I wasn't surprised that I never thought they were taking him just from things that I knew. But I think I was surprised at the overall process when it was going on. It's kind of weird for me to say, because I thought once Shedeur went, I figured it was going to be Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, Shedeur in some kind of order. I was like, the Jets should probably, unless Milroe really fell, the Jets should just punt on quarterback in this draft. Like, ride it out with Fields. If the wheels fall off the bus to a catastrophic point, you have Tyrod there. And then attack quarterback, use your picks on other areas in need. And I didn't really love how they did that all the time, but they did do it that way. I think I wasn't surprised, and I'll tell you why, Gordon. Aaron Glenn's mission since he got here has been to just zap the noise around this organization. It has. I was at the combine 3 feet in front of him at his podium, and it was very intense. I thought his eyes light up when you ask him scouting and football questions. I thought when you said the name Aaron Rodgers or made it about a player compared to making it about the team, he almost became grouchy about it. And I don't blame him.
Right.
Like I wasn't sitting there. I didn't care to ask him a question about Aaron Rodgers. He's doubled down during OTAs this week in media availability. He said Justin Fields has no interest in being a celebrity quarterback. And it's easy to sit here and say you want to be Parcells, and it's not going to be easy to do. But at least you have the idea. If you have a mentality and an identity and you stick to it, I don't think people can criticize you for that. And I think Aaron Glenn's mentality and identity is, and this is what Detroit did. Detroit is one of the rare really good teams in the NFL that it's not about Jared Goff. It is about the Detroit Lions. And I think Aaron Glenn wants it to be about the New York Jets 53-man roster. And then if they get a quarterback in the draft down the line that goes into that infrastructure and succeeds, great. But he does not want it to be about one human, and he will keep doubling and tripling down on that. And if the Jets drafted Shedeur, even in the 4th round, it would go against everything he believes in. Whether that is fair to Shedeur or not, Glenn stuck to what he believes in.
So Shedeur, it was more about the off the field and the distraction concerns rather than the tape, correct?
Yes, and it's because he wasn't a good enough player that you can overcome that. Shedeur is a solid quarterback. Like, he's pretty accurate. He's pretty smart with his decision making. And he's somebody that I think understands touch and timing. He's not a great runner. He's not big. And he kind of falls into the bucket of the Andy Daltons and Teddy Bridgewaters of the world. And those guys at times won a lot of games. But those guys didn't say, everybody jump on my back and follow me. I'm going to drag us to wins. And if you are not under the bucket of you're going to drag us to wins, here's the harsh truth. The NFL at this point really doesn't want anything to do with you as a first round pick. They don't. They've tried it with certain guys and it's blown up in their faces. If Shedeur was every bit as good as Cam Ward, Shedeur would have went 2nd or 3rd overall. It's as simple as that. But he's probably going to be a better backup in the league than a lot of guys that are backups. He's better than the quarterback the Browns drafted in the 3rd round in Dylan Gabriel. But it's everything that comes with him. And coaches do not love the idea that, hey, if we start Shedeur and it goes badly for a couple games, is Dion going to say something in the news that gets me fired? People don't like whether they like to hear it or not.
That's why I never thought he was a possibility for the Giants. The Giants would never get into that situation voluntarily.
No, and honestly, the Jets, after the Rodgers experience, are doing everything to not do that. It's embarrassing. It is embarrassing. And once again, I almost find it at times, he doesn't do himself favors all the time, but sometimes it's been unfair to Shedeur because I think that he does take on what his dad comes with. But it sounds like throughout the process, he didn't always help himself either. So I never thought he'd fall to the 5th round. But him not being a first-round pick or somebody viewed as somebody that could save a franchise, that's not shocking.
Is the situation he now finds himself in unsalvageable?
No, because they're so bad at quarterback, the Browns. He can force the hand if he's just better than everyone else in camp. I don't know. I don't believe that coaching staff wanted anything to do with that pick.
It didn't seem like it on video.
You brought back Joe Flacco for stability. You traded for Kenny Pickett, and you drafted a quarterback in the 3rd round over Shedeur. There's not enough reps in the world to get a 4th guy picks. So, but the problem now is, say that, Flacco is just washed. And there was a lot of times last year where he looked it. Pickett's never been good. Gabriel isn't good right now. Is Shedeur, like, you got to sometimes just play to win. So it's salvageable, but I think their line has significantly regressed. It just feels like a situation that he might have some moments, but it's not a great developmental situation for Shedeur, because if he struggles, also they could just cut him.
Was there any team that you felt like, especially early on day one, that you were really surprised or made you did a double take on their pick?
Oh, that's a good one. I was surprised the Panthers took T-Mac, Teteroa McMillan. Okay. I was happily surprised. There's a player like this every year. You watch him over summer and you go, this guy's a top 10 to 15 pick. You watch him throughout the season. You go, this guy's a top 10 to 15 pick. Everyone loves him. Everyone's on board. Season ends. Draft process starts. A couple, guys that are really plugged in release mock drafts or rankings, and the player's a little lower than you expect. And then he falls a couple more spots. And then you get one rumor that a team doesn't like his combine interview, or a team thinks he's slow, or actually this receiver that came out of nowhere is better than him. And then you get to the draft and none of that BS matters. The guy goes top 10. And you sit there, and as a draft analyst, you need to be very careful here what you want to buy into and what you don't. McMillan, to me, was always a top player. And if you didn't count Travis Hunter as a receiver in this class, was always the top wide receiver. I never moved off of that. But I think it was fascinating to watch the varying opinions on him team by team. And then the guy goes 8th overall anyway. And I think he's going to be really, really good with Bryce Young in Carolina.
The Buccaneers got one of your A grades. They took the wide receiver out of Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka. Anytime you take a wide receiver out of Ohio State, that's an automatic good move, good pick right there. What did you like about Tampa's draft?
Well, with the Bucs, you get a situation that you get a pro at wide receiver, right? That's the most important thing, is that you're getting a guy that comes in tailor-made, ready to rock, and a pro mentality, a pro skill set, a good athlete. And they've had a lot of injuries at their wide receiver position over the years. Mike Evans, the hamstring acts up. Chris Godwin's had more significant injuries, but it was beyond that. I looked at the 2 corners they got. Benjamin Morrison, you always get a little worried about hip injuries to corners, but if he bounces back from that, he was a guy that I had a 1st-round grade on coming out of summer, and the injury really hurt him. Jacob Parrish, I thought, was one of the most underrated players in this entire draft. He is the prototypical Todd Bowles slot, twitchy, fast, instinctual. And then you get David Walker, the pass rusher out of Central Arkansas, who was just a demon at the FCS level. He had a lot of offers to graduate up to D1 football, and he decided to stay loyal. He's from Arkansas. He didn't want to transfer, dominated that level of competition, looked pretty good at the Senior Bowl. He's going to be a good pass rusher in this league as a rotational guy, because he's a little unorthodox with his size. But I thought the Bucs just find a way to get value at needs over and over again. And Jason Light is one of the best drafters in the entire NFL.
The Ravens had a lot of picks on day 3. What do you like about their draft as a whole?
Well, the Ravens like to play the compensatory pick game. And with that is something that they just believe in lotto tickets. And this is something they openly talk about. They believe in, when you play the compensatory pick formula, that the more swings you have, the better chance you're going to have filling out a roster. And it's something they believe in over and over again. I mean, look at the amount of players that they've drafted, 3 of the last 4 years right now. This was I believe 11 or 12 player class for them. And they have 4 or 5, 6th round picks. But you just look at what the Ravens do. They kind of sit in the weeds. They're almost the Eagles of the AFC. They just don't get credit for it because they haven't won the Super Bowl recently. I mean, you get Malachi Starks, who was a top 20 player at safety. They had so many problems on the back end. You get Mike Green, who it sounds like there was some off-field concerns with teams, but I think he's a top 10 player in the draft off of talent. You got him at 59. And then you kind of look at how they attack developmental players on day 3. Carson Vincent, the tackle from Alabama A&M. They love doing this. They take guys that are really gifted, that haven't hit their ceiling yet, and they go learn for 2 years, and then we're going to start you. They do it all the time. And these guys graduate to starting roles on the offensive line. They let somebody else on their offensive line or any position walk in free agency, and they get compensatory picks back to get more selections, and they rinse and repeat over and over again. So this is a organization that not only knows how to evaluate, but most importantly, they know how to develop, and they keep accumulating assets. They have gamed the system almost perfectly.
So those are the winners of the draft. Safe to say the Saints are the loser of the draft.
Yeah, the Saints have a infrastructure problem right now where they refuse to reset their cap and take a down year. They keep making signings no matter how much cap in the red they are. And then, which I don't understand. And then they went into this draft, and there's things I like about Tyler Shuck as a long-term backup. I thought he was more around the 100th best player in the draft. They take him 40th. Obviously Derek Carr has had these questions. He was hurt last year, and there was always the possibility he wasn't going to be ready to play this year. And then he just walks away. They have no plan for Tyler Shuck is what it feels like to me. And you know how it's not just me saying this? Look at their head coaching hiring process. Like, they wanted Aaron Glenn. They wanted these bigger names. They couldn't get guys to go there. I like Kelvin Banks. I think their offensive line is going to be significantly improved after taking him and Talizo Fuanga the last 2 years. But I didn't think they got a ton of value on day 3 as much as I like Danny Stutzman at linebacker. And I just don't really get why the Saints refuse to sit back for a year or two, totally rebuild, nuke the system, start over. It just feels like they're constantly 1 foot forward, 2 steps back. The Saints are the guy at 3 a.m. at the poker table in the cloud of smoke that will not walk away. And there is nothing to indicate that you are going to win the next hand. We've had years and years of examples of this, and they keep doubling and tripling down.
All right, from a fantasy perspective, because obviously you're involved in that as well, outside of Genty, who obviously walks into a great situation with the Raiders, is there any other rookies that we need to keep an eye on as we get closer to draft time? Hey, this is a guy who's going to make an immediate impact.
Quinshon Judkins on the Browns, I think, is going to be a star. Number one, Stefanski's run scheme is really, really well designed, and it's all there for Judkins. The Browns said Nick Chubb era is over. Yeah, I understand they took Dylan Sampson from Tennessee later on in the draft as a change of pace guy, and Jerome Ford is there. But Judkins was a star at Ole Miss for 2 years, and then he got to go to Ohio State, win a championship, and save his legs a little bit. He had the committee split with Travion Henderson. He didn't change as a player. He's a battering ram. He's very strong. He's got great leg strength, leg drive. I think Judkins will be one of those players where we look around and, man, he went over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns as a rookie, and people kind of just wanted to stay away from the Browns offense as a whole, and maybe that's a mistake.
I'm not going to ask you about next year's draft just yet. Has your prep already started for next year, or does that take a little while?
I watched exactly 8 quarterbacks. That's it. I haven't watched anyone else right now.
All right, well, let's start with one of those 8, I'm sure. Arch Manning, would you expect him to be the number 1 pick? And if not him, as we sit here right now, who do you think will be the number 1 pick next year?
I would if I thought he's declaring. I would call it 60-40 that he's not right now, because this is a unique situation. This is somebody that, forget that he, comes from NFL royalty, and with that comes financial, all kinds of stuff. He's going to make a lot of money off NIL anyway. That doesn't matter. I think the Manning family is going to be very careful with Arch's pathway, where, one, is he ready as a player? Has he developed enough at the college level that he's ready to go to the pros? Because he hasn't started at full time yet. I've only watched the games that he got into last year, and I love what I saw in Arch Manning. Like, this is every bit of a guy with a future number 1 overall pick. And then 2, is there somewhere they want him to go? And is it possible in this era to orchestrate that where they might sit there and go, we don't like the top 3 picks in the draft. Arch is still developing. Go back to school, make what, $5 million NIL money? I don't even know what it is anymore. So I think he is every bit of a future number 1 overall pick. I don't know if that's going to be in the 2026 draft or the 2027 draft. If I was a betting man today, I would say it's more likely it's the 2027 draft.
If it's not him going number 1, who do you have an eye on as we sit here today?
It's just wide open. I mean, you got all these quarterbacks that have a lot of work left to do that are in, like Lenore Sellers from South Carolina's got all the tools. Drew Aller from Penn State has the tools. You look at Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. If it's a quarterback, I'm sure when I watch the rest of the positions, there'll be much better players that warrant that. But usually a quarterback plays their way to the number 1 selection. So I think that if you're a team that believes you're in the tank this year and you're going to be watching these quarterbacks all college season, you are rooting for Arch Manning to be a superstar from the very first game he plays this year till the end of the season, and that the Manning family likes that your team is picking number 1.
All right, you got all the football stuff going on, but you also have your Mets pod as well. Any concerns about the Juan Soto situation?
I think it's been a little overblown. I think he doesn't look right. He doesn't look like Juan Soto, but I also, maybe it's just it's definitely not an optimist in me. It's almost the opposite. I lived this. I was much younger when Piazza got off to a slow start, so I don't remember it the way it's being described, but I'm sure it's obviously all real. I remember Carlos Beltran, where it looked like a disaster. I lived it with Francisco Lindor.
That's the one that jumps out to me because that really looked bad. Yeah,
that went on. That wasn't like Lindor had a bad start to his career. No. That was like we were in the beginning of last year, and everybody's like, what are the Mets going to do with this situation? And then in New York, if you answer the bell at the biggest moment, no one cares about anything before that. No one cares. So my belief is at 26 years old, Soto is just too good and too clutch that if the Mets are playing in big games from August and on, I think Soto is going to answer the bell. And with that naturally is going to come more, joy and happiness. The Mets are 30. Here's the thing, Gordon. I grew up rooting for the Mets, the Jets, the Rangers, and the Knicks. So you're telling, if you ask me to sign up for a 30-20 Mets team, I sit there with an ear-to-ear smile and say, yeah, I lived the Wilpon era where you were wondering, okay, do we have anyone in AA that's going to be exciting for me to watch in August this year, and no hope in free agency. So I probably look at it a little differently than the New York City does, big picture wise. I just think Soto is just too good, and I've seen this song and dance so many times already.
It's really more in line with what everyone should expect, but for whatever reason, I guess because he is the big free agent signing and he's changing teams, you expect when you spend whatever it is top of the market for that guy to come in right away and hit the ground running, and that's just not generally how it happens. This is a much more common tale when you're talking about high-priced free agents.
Well, he has an OPS over 800, right?
Yeah, so he's 2 weeks away from being Juan Soto.
That's the funniest thing is that he had that streak in the beginning of May where he was, had an OPS over 960 or whatever. And the problem with the Mets right now is Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos. And nobody will talk about it because we like those guys. They're Mets, right? Vientos is homegrown. Nimmo is homegrown. Those guys look lost every time they're up there. And Soto's got to be better because he's Juan Soto, and that comes with the territory of the deal. But Nimmo can't hit in the 5-hole every night if his on base right now is 275.
And that used to be his go-to thing. He was always on base.
Always on base, working counts. And I love Brandon Nimmo. And I hate that we have to talk bad about but this isn't like a this year thing with Brandon Nimmo. This is now back to last July. So I wonder when it turns, if Soto starts to produce at the level we're so used to seeing produce, and the Mets hit a rut because they get nothing out of the 4, 5, or 6 spot or 7 spot or whatever it is. When did we open that conversation of you're expected to be a borderline championship team? You can't have an absolute dud in those spots. And we don't have proof that it's going to turn right now.
Connor, thanks for a few minutes, man. Great stuff as always. And hopefully we'll catch up with you down the road.
Absolutely, Gordon. Always a blast, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get to the Knicks winning Game 3, heading into Game 4 tonight. I will admit that in that first half, it felt like the Knicks were absolutely toast. Brunson was in foul trouble. Cat was awful on really both ends. Brunson was awful on both ends. But here's the thing. And I should have not fallen for the first half. I mean, do we need any more examples of how first half of NBA games do not matter? The Knicks have proven that repeatedly with the reliance on the three-point shot now. Yes, there's another 20-point comeback, and that is impressive. But 20-point comebacks are not as outlandish as they used to be. It feels like every single game has a 20-point comeback nowadays. Certainly that has been the case for the Knicks. And they needed that Game 3 win. They got that Game 3 win, and it makes this a series. So now Game 4 basically decides everything. This becomes either a series or it's just another chapter of missed opportunities and thinking back to that Game 1 or how they lost Game 2 and a long off season of what ifs and how it should have been different and all that type of stuff. But I do think that this is now a series because we've seen every game has been close. The point differential total through the 3 games is 2 points. The Pacers have scored 2 more points in the 3 games combined. So this series has been a coin flip. I would not be surprised if tonight's Game 4 comes right down to the wire because that's what we've seen so far. So either team could be up 2-1 at this point. Either team could be down 0-3 at this point. It's been this kind of series, and it feels like tonight is going to absolutely decide everything. Now, that Game 3 performance, hopefully, that is the last time we have to wonder about Karl Anthony Towns being aggressive. You see what he can be when he takes the bull by the horns and takes the ball to the rack and does all the different things. But then you'll see these glimpses of him doing it. And then again, he'll kind of disappear. But I give him credit for that Game 3. You absolutely needed him to do that. And I think being forced to play without Brunson brought out that aggressiveness. He had to be the guy, and he absolutely responded. So I kind of wonder if that's something that Tibbs might kind of tap into more in Game 4 and more in this series as we go along. Now, look, there have been a lot of ridiculous storylines following Game 3 about Jalen Brunson, and I'm not going to get into that. What I am going to say is that Knicks fans, you guys are complete hypocrites when it comes to Tom Thibodeau, because if Tom Thibodeau had played that Game 3 out exactly the same way, the same players playing the same minutes, and the Knicks had lost that game, for whatever reason, you guys would have been screaming, how could you leave Brunson on the bench for as long as you did? Why are you playing DeLon Wright for so long? And it's all based on winning the game. And even then, any credit given to Tibbs is given begrudgingly. Well, he was forced to do that because Brunson was in foul trouble. Hey, he should do this. He does it. They win the game. Well, he should have done it before now. So I can absolutely predict the future when it comes to the Knicks. And it's this: Knicks fans are going to, however the Knicks season ends, Tibbs is going to get the blame from Knicks fans. Players could turn the ball over every other time down the floor. They could shoot 2 for 1,000. It doesn't matter. Tibbs is going to get the blame. I understand that. But if you're one of these Tibbs must go people, I want you to understand this. Tom Thibodeau is not coaching for his job. He was not coaching for his job in the last series. He's not coaching for his job in this series. I keep seeing after the Knicks win a game like they won in Game 3, well, Tom Thibodeau saved his job. His job was not in jeopardy. You honestly think after what the Knicks have gone through over the last 25 years, they're going to fire the most successful coach they've had in 2.5 decades? Honestly, a coach who could still this year guide the team to the NBA Finals. You think that this is a conversation that the Knicks front office is having while the playoffs are going on? The team owner burned through, 13 head coaches in 25 years? And you think this guy is going to be the guy he fires after having a revolving door at head coach? Guys, get serious. Tom Thibodeau is not on the hot seat. He just got an extension last July and now has the team deeper in the playoffs than at any time over the last 25 years. Knicks fans' passion is obvious, and it's a great thing to have passion. But sometimes that passion crosses into delusion, and thinking that the Knicks are going to fire Tom Thibodeau or that he's coaching for his job in this year's playoffs, that might be the best example of that passion turning into delusion. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Again, If you've not already, please hit that subscribe button, like the episode, rate the episode, whatever possibly you can do. We will be back later this week with another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports.